Hi, friends. Kenzie here. This week's episode was meant to go out next week, but due to family stuff, we moved it to this week since Lauren and I couldn't get together to record. Because we had planned to record another episode before this, the explanation that we give in the episode doesn't really make a lot of sense, so I'm just here to pop in and kind of explain. This week, I will be covering stories that Lauren has a lot of interest in, and then in the future, Lauren will cover a story that I have a lot of interest in. So in this episode, I'm going to be the only one sharing some stories while Lauren listens. Next week, we will still have an episode for you, but it will be a little bit different than what you're used to. We do really appreciate your understanding as we try to navigate schedules and personal needs. We will be back to our regularly scheduled programming when spooky season concludes. And as always, thank you for your support of the show, and we hope you enjoy the spooky special.
You are listening to A Scary State, and this week we're covering something spooky. So, Kenzie?
Yes, Lauren.
Let's get scary.
Okay, we're about to.
So,
Hopefully.
We're closing out spooky season with your story.
Yes. So for today, when we did, I picked the one I wanted, and I was like, well, what about you? And sweet child. She knows too much. And so I know that she has fascination feels like not the right word.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like the right word, but
A
wide
intrigue?
interest, a lot of exposure
Yes.
to some of these stories.
Yeah. And so there's one particular that, I would say you find the most mind-boggling, the most,
Yeah. Yeah.
wanted to figure out.
Yeah.
The biggest enigma, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And but I was like, okay, but what does she not know? So here we go. Because you know so much, it was really difficult to figure out how to write these stories.
Are we gonna say who? No?
Yeah, I'm gonna get
Okay,
into that.
okay.
I'm gonna do that. I just didn't, I don't want to give it away at the beginning. Okay. And if they read the description, it'll be in there.
Right.
And I had a whole intro written out, ready to do it. But this was truly, I made it up as I went along.
Okay.
I had no idea where it was going. Because I was like, I had a lot of information about one,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't have a lot of information about the other. So that was harder to kind of figure out, like, well, how can I put another spin to this because I don't know it that well.
Mm-hmm.
This one, because I know well, it was easier for me to kind of like not twist it, but like,
Gear the story.
correct. The other one is a little bit more straightforward,
Okay.
but I'm hoping that it touches on things that maybe is like the details of are lesser known.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of a hodgepodge of things. But here's my attempt at telling you, Lauren, something you don't know. We'll check in at the end. So, first up, for those of you less familiar with Ed Kemper, Edmund Ed Kemper, also known as the Co-Ed Killer, is an infamous American serial killer and necrophile who murdered 10 people, including his grandparents, mother, and 6 young women between 1964 and 1973. Born on December 18th, 1948 in Burbank, California, Kemper had a troubled childhood marked by abuse from his mother, which influenced his violent tendencies. At age 15, he killed his grandparents, leading to his placement in a psychiatric facility where he was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. After being released at 21, Kemper began a series of brutal murders targeting hitchhiking female college students. Oh my God, put a pin. My mother, I'm explaining to her, because we had already had this planned by then.
Right.
So when I was with her, I was explaining to her what we were doing. I talked about hitchhiking, and I was like, this way people don't do this shit anymore. And she goes, I picked up some hitchhikers once. And I go, you what? She's like, yeah, like it was in college. Like we were all, it was a bunch of us. And I said, no. She was like, I was fine. I said, you were. But don't do it again.
I mean, back then, that's what people did.
I know. And I was like, it's the reasons like that all those serial killers happen and why no one does it today.
Right.
You could have been a statistic, mother. And she was like, I thought it was fine because, I picked them up. I was like, they can still kill you.
Yeah. I mean, I told you the story about my grandma picked someone up.
I think.
Yeah. And then he asked her, well, how do you know I'm not a serial killer?
Right. Yes,
or
yes,
why are
yes.
you not afraid? And she goes,
Yeah.
oh, because my husband and brother-in-law are in the car behind us.
Yeah.
They weren't.
Yeah.
There were no cars. But the guy was like, oh, okay.
And like where, like my mom was like, it was something with like her college or something like that, where it was like everyone was kind of like in the same space. So I'm like, I get it. Yes. Out of all the situations, you probably did the smartest one can do.
I mean, did it scare her at all? Like Ed Kemper was the co-ed killer?
I don't think I have tried, like when I've talked about these things,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think either of my parents really like knew.
Yeah, because I mean, right now we have the podcast and we have the news that goes across the nation and like we
Right.
have all of that. But back then it wasn't.
Right.
It wasn't
And,
like
like,
that.
There was things that made national news, but I
Mhm.
also think about when we were like in high school and early college, we weren't paying attention
No.
to that shit.
We weren't.
You know, even now, I kind of know of current things,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't go searching for it
Right.
until it's kind of like all wrapped up.
Right.
So like there's a whole documentary on the Boston Marathon. I
Mm.
remember that.
Yeah.
And I remember watching it, but when I watched the documentary, there were so many parts about it too that I'm like, I know that was in the news, but I don't remember watching that part.
Right.
So I kind of feel like that, you know,
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. Maybe they liked reading newspapers. Seems just like a lot of work to get the news.
Well, they didn't really have their phones.
I know. Twitter is just so sufficient. Anywho, Kemper's killings were characterized by extreme violence, including dismemberment and sexual assault, often post-mortem. For those of you that don't know, that means after they're dead.
Mm-hmm.
Despite his heinous crimes, he was highly intelligent with an IQ of 145. I also saw 136 somewhere, but either way.
Either way, above 100, above
Yes.
the average.
And cooperated extensively with law enforcement after his arrest, offering detailed confessions. In 1973, Kemper turned himself in after killing his mother and her friend, marking the end of his murder spree. He was convicted of 8 murders and sentenced to life in prison without parole, where he remains today. His case has been studied extensively in criminal psychology due to his openness about his motives and methods.
And I think the thing that fascinates me about him so much is just how he does the interviews.
Yeah.
And how calm he is and how calculated and how smart he is. And
Yeah.
I think that's what gets me. And I think what really like propelled that, not like, again, not fascination, because I don't like using that word.
But fascination, I
But-
feel like, so, okay, here's my take. Fascination is similar like consequence.
Mm-hmm.
Consequence, most people assume is negative, but you can have positive consequences
Right.
and negative consequences.
Okay.
I feel like there's a fascination in the sense of like curiosity we typically associate with trying to be a positive trait, which normally it is.
Mm-hmm.
But you can have curiosity and fascination to understand something that is dark.
Yes. And so with him, when Mindhunters was a big show, he was one of the big characters on it.
Yes.
And the guy who portrayed him just did it so well that I was just like, oh my God. So just the way that he composed himself and just how smart he was. I
Yeah.
think that's just why I'm like, I don't know what it is. It's just something about that mannerism I think is also so scary, because sometimes serial killers react out of like rage and passion and things like that. He was just so smart. Like that's
Well,
why it's just.
And if you listen to one of our most recent episodes where I talk about the profiles of these
Mhm.
serial killers,
Yep.
the biggest thing is that 9 times out of 10, they're normal.
Yeah.
Like they're smart, or they know how to go through the motions of what humans expect
Right.
to,
Mm-hmm.
and he was no different.
Yep.
Hmm.
When I went to the beach a couple years ago, one of the servers looked just like Ed Kemper.
Ooh.
So now we remember that restaurant is Ed Kemper restaurant. Can't remember the actual name, but we're like, oh my God, the food was so good.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Any user. The beach town of Santa Cruz lies south of San Francisco on the Pacific coast. In the early 1970s, an influx of young people and hippies came to the area, partly due to the University of California opening a new campus. At the time, most murders in the U.S. were situational, such as domestic violence or altercations between acquaintances. However, the murders in the 1970s in Santa Cruz were different. Some perpetrators were caught, but one killer seemed to elude the police. By 1973, people were buying guns to protect themselves. So near the end of 1970, John Lindley Frazier murdered 5 people, including Dr. Victor Ota, his family, and his secretary. Frazier shot them with a .38 caliber revolver and put their bodies in the pool. He claimed he was trying to stop the spread of progress ruining the environment.
Ooh.
Living an extreme hippie lifestyle, Frazier was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia but declared sane and convicted. During his trial, he feigned insanity, which is known as malingering. fabricating or exaggerating symptoms of personal gain, such as avoiding arrest or mitigating a prison sentence. Then, in late 1972 to early 1973, another series of murders occurred in the Santa Cruz area. The victims included campers, a priest, a man in his garden, a young girl, and a mother and her 2 children. The police struggled to find a pattern because the victims varied in age, race, and gender, and there was no consistent weapon or MO that was identified. To complicate matters, Ed Kemper was also active in the area at the same time. Santa Cruz is going through a lot.
Yeah, don't live in California.
Herbert Mullen and Ed Kemper shared more than just a desire to kill. Both were born in California, Mullen on April 18th, 1947, and Kemper on December 18th, 1948.
Ew.
Kemper had an IQ of 130 to 145, while Mullen was voted most likely to succeed in high school. While both experienced difficulties as teenagers, Kemper exhibited sociopathic behavior, torturing animals and entertaining violent fantasies. At 15, he killed his grandparents, leading to his commitment to Atascadero State Hospital. Meanwhile, Mullen, after the death of his close friend, became obsessed with reincarnation. Diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, he was in and out of mental hospitals by age 25. Both men eventually moved back in with their parents after being released from psychiatric care. Kemper and Mullen's motivations were vastly different. Mullen believed in killings were blood sacrifices to prevent a catastrophic earthquake, influenced by voices he heard and his belief that 13 people needed to die to satisfy nature. So originally, I guess his birthday falls on the anniversary of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, which...
Mullen or Kemper?
Mullen, which he, for whatever reason, associates as being important.
Oh, okay.
And so for a while, he thought that the Vietnam War was providing plenty of sacrifices to appease whoever to not make this earthquake happen. So when the war was like dying down or whatever, he was like, well, we need more. And he was like 13. Oh, and they also have to be willing. And he said that they were willing because they told him telepathically that they were willing.
Yep. Yep. Of course. Okay. Tracking. Yep.
Yeah. In contrast, Kemper viewed his killings as a game of manipulation, domination, and control. FBI agent John Douglas, one of the pioneers of profiling, noted that Kemper fully relished his crimes and had complete awareness of what he was doing, unlike Mullen, who was motivated by delusions.
Which is also so scary.
Yes.
Like the delusion one, that's scary.
Yeah.
But at least it's like, that's not who they are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it is, but it's not.
Yeah.
But when they fully know what they're doing and they're fine with what they're doing, that's scary.
Correct. By the time Mullen committed his first murder in October 1972, Kemper had already killed 3 co-eds, Marianne Pesky, Anita Lashisa, and Aiko Koo. In May 1972, the community was still shaken from the Fraser trial when Marianne and Anita disappeared while hitchhiking from Fresno State College to Stanford. On August 15th, a human head was found in the mountains and identified as Marianne Pesky, though no remains were recovered. No other remains were recovered.
Yeah.
It was presumed both girls had met with foul play.
Ugh.
Then in early September, 15-year-old Aiko Koo disappeared while hitchhiking from Berkeley. About a month later, Mullen began his spree by murdering 55-year-old wanderer Lawrence Whitey White with a baseball bat. 2 weeks after killing White, he murdered Mary Guilfoyle after offering her a ride. Her body wasn't found until February 1973 after his final crime. In November 1972, Mullen killed Father Henry Tomey while receiving confession, claiming that the priest volunteered to be his next sacrifice.
Oh my God.
In early January 1973, Cindy Scall disappeared on her way to class at Cabrillo Community College. Witnesses saw her get a ride, after which she vanished. Days later, dismembered remains were found near a Pacific Cliff, identified as Sydney's. Later that month, Mullen murdered his high school friend, Jim Gianera, blaming him for introducing him to cannabis, and killed Gianera's wife, Joan. He also killed Kathy Francis, who had pointed him to Gianera's house, and her 2 children, Damien 4 and David 9.
Oh.
On February 5th, 2 more co-eds, Rosalind Thorpe and Alice Liu, disappeared while hitchhiking with no leads. Then on February 10th, Mullen came across 4 teenage boys camping illegally in a Santa Cruz state park. Robert Spector, who was 18, Brian Scott Card, 19, David Olecker, 18, and Mark Drabellis, 15. And he killed them. Before their bodies were even discovered, Mullen shot 72-year-old Freddie Abbey Perez while he was gardening. Fortunately, a neighbor witnessed the murder, recorded Mullen's license plate, and alerted the police, leading to his arrest.
Jeez.
So both of these things were happening at the same time. some within like days of each other. Mullen was declared legally sane and competent to stand trial, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
He was convicted of 2 first-degree murders and 9 second-degree murders and sentenced to life in prison. He was denied parole 8 times before dying on August 18th, 2022. It's weird that there's a bunch of 18s in his life.
Yeah.
He was born on an 18th, died on an 18th. Yeah.
No. It fits into his whole thing.
Yeah. Although Mullen was connected to most shootings, he wasn't linked to the co-ed hitchhiking murders, as kidnapping and dismemberment were a part of his pattern. So Santa Cruz remained in a state of fear.
Mm-hmm.
On March 4th, hikers found remains near Highway 1, later identified as Rosalind Thorpe and Alice Liu, who had been shot in the head. Authorities, overwhelmed by the unsolved killings, had few leads until the unexpected occurred. The third and final killer terrorizing Santa Cruz was caught after he called the police to confess. Ed Kemper had a unique and almost eerie relationship with the police. Despite his gruesome crimes, he frequented a local bar where law enforcement officers gathered. Kemper was polite, friendly, and interested in criminal investigations, allowing him to blend in.
Oh my gosh.
The police saw him as a harmless, intelligent man.
Mm-hmm.
They nicknamed him Big Ed.
Mm-hmm. God, it's just so weird. Oh yeah, and how big he is kind of terrifying too.
Yes. Ironically, he even participated in conversations about the ongoing co-ed killer case.
God.
His familiarity with police procedures helped him evade suspicion until he voluntarily turned himself in after his final murders.
There are some times like that where I wonder how long could they have kept going?
Well, I think it's the Unabomber. Decades.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because he was like poking the bear, like reaching out and things like that. That's how he got caught.
Jeez.
Because he was like, I need more attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so
that's always their downfall. It's the needing more attention.
Yep. I mean, when he goes to call, it's because he doesn't see it on the news. You know, he said that the reason he talks so much is because, you know, he doesn't, you know, want someone else like him to go around. And I'm like,
and this is Kemper?
Yeah. I'm like, I don't believe for a second you are doing this out of the goodness of your heart. You don't have that ability.
Because you want everything about what you did to be known.
Yeah, you have huge ego.
And have it related to you. Yeah.
Right. You have a huge fucking ego.
Yep. Is he still alive?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God.
He actually just recently got denied parole in 2024.
Oh, you poor thing.
It won't be... He a lot of the times didn't want the parole.
Mm-hmm.
And then the most recent one, I think it was just denied. But he had like recently just gone like, I think under psychiatric evaluation and still deemed too dangerous.
God.
And he's in his 70s at this point, probably.
I'd believe he's still too dangerous.
Yeah, because he's 47. Dad is 50. So.
Well, because he was 21 and 64.
Well, he's about a decade older than my dad.
Okay, so he's in his 80s. He'd probably be in his 80s because if he was 20 and 64 was 60 years ago.
He was 15 and 64.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He was 20 and 68.
Yeah, so mid-70s.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Old.
Yeah. Well, but still capable.
Still deemed a danger to society.
Ugh.
And I think his next one is like sometime in the 2030s.
Oh, God.
So, yeah. It actually took several phone calls to the Santa Cruz police before they believed him and checked his mother's house, where they found the brutally murdered bodies of his mother, Clarnell Strandberg, and her friend Sarah Sally Hallett. After his arrest, Kemper confessed for hours, detailing everything he had done to the college women, his mother, and her friend. Including the murders of his grandparents, he had committed a total of 10 murders. To prove he was telling the truth, he led detectives to locations where he had buried or discarded body parts that had not yet been found. He described having sex with the heads of his victims and experienced that he had enjoyed the feeling of complete possession over them.
Oh, my God.
Kemper was indicted on 8 counts of first-degree murder on May 7th, 1973, and Mullen's insanity trial began on July 30th, 1973. Between Frazier, Mullen, and Kemper, 28 people were murdered in Santa Cruz, California between 1970 and 1973.
Jeez.
Kemper attempted suicide twice, but failed. His trial began on October 23rd, 1973, after 3 prosecution psychiatrists found him sane. His confession to police was just the beginning. During the trial and the years that followed, Kemper gave detailed accounts of his crimes. He explained his methods, motives, and the psychological factors that drove him to kill. Kemper's openness provided significant insights for the FBI, particularly for the Behavioral Science Unit. His case became foundational in understanding serial killers and contributed to early criminal profiling. Kemper was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, where he remains today, participating in interviews and reflecting on his crimes.
Like, just how cool is that? That, not what he did, obviously,
Yes.
but how they used him to do profiling. Like, this is just so cool.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because this is for you.
Okay.
FBI agents John Douglas and Robert R. Ressler were on the road talking with local jurisdictions when they came up with the idea to visit prisons and interview notorious killers.
Ugh, my dream job.
They hoped to include this information in the data they were gathering about crimes being committed by those unknown suspects on whom they were offering profiles. Kemper was one of the first serial murderers the agents interviewed. Douglas told the Daily Mail that Kemper was, quote, not an intimidating figure, adding, quote, he was not a bully, he was bullied upon. He would talk to me at great lengths about the abuse he suffered as a child by his mom. He said she would tell him, you're a bum, you're nothing, you're just like your father. His mother was a professor at the University of Santa Cruz, and Kemper would hang around the campus, sometimes trying to pick up girls and get a date, he told me during our interview. Douglas continued, his mom would tell him, those women are too good for you. Stop trying. You can never have a woman like that. He told me that he thought, yes, Mom, I can have them by killing them. He told me he would rehearse pickup lines, rehearse picking up co-eds before he actually started going through with murdering them. He would also rehearse killing them and killing his mother. He would stand by the foot of her bed as she slept, holding a claw hammer, fantasizing about killing her, but not yet going through with it. When I asked what he was thinking while standing over his sleeping mother, he told me, I wanted to smash her. He then started killing his girls his mother said he could never have. Douglas also shared, quote, he would bury their severed heads outside her bedroom window and position them so that they were angled so that they would be staring upwards towards her, since she would tell him that she enjoyed people looking up at her, which she deemed a sign of respect.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, she was awful.
Yeah. Douglas concluded, quote, you cannot rehabilitate someone like that. Douglas was like referring to Kemper.
Right.
High intelligence, manipulative. He also explained why Kemper was so difficult to catch. He said, quote, Kemper was difficult to catch because he would desecrate the bodies, so forensic scientists at the time did not have much to go on. He would also put various body parts in different locations. Douglas, who retired from the FBI in 1955, credited the Kemper case as an important advancement in how the organization approached cases. He said, quote, before Kemper, animal cruelty was not a sign specified by profilers and investigators. On forms, there was only bedwetting, fire setting, and a section marked with other.
That whole thing is called the McDonald Triad. And when you and Allie were doing the episode, she was like, oh, what's that thing? And I was screaming, the McDonald Triad! And both of you guys were like, I can't remember. There was one part of it where she's like, there's this thing that's kind of like an indicator of if someone's going to be like a serial killer or not.
And I didn't catch on that? Weird, because I don't know if I would have called it the McDonald Triad, but I would have known it was like the three.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah. Because both of you are like, what's the name for it?
Yeah.
Because you caught on to like what it was.
Oh, okay.
But not the name of it.
Yeah, that
and I was
would
there
make
like,
sense.
it's the McDonald Triad.
Yeah, I definitely would have forgotten the name. Anyway, this changed after Kemper. After his meeting with the co-ed killer, Douglas would transfer to the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit in 1977 and went on to interview and profile the likes of Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and Dillis Lynn Rader, the BTK killer.
Dennis.
What did I say? Denise?
I think so.
Jesus. It's okay. He doesn't need to have a...
He doesn't. He hated his name, so we'll keep saying it.
Right, exactly. Dennis. After profiling dozens of notorious serial killers, the accomplished agent authored a 57-page questionnaire used by agents to profile serial killers and the like. Douglas said some of the criteria for the study included victimology, police investigations, forensic findings, the offender's background, pre-offensive behavior, and post-offensive behavior. The discoveries made from the interviews and studies done by Douglas and Ressler played a major role in changing how police and federal agents approach a case, even to this day. So, one of the most horrifying cases of captivity and abuse in modern American history, the story of Ariel Castro and the unimaginable crimes he committed in Cleveland, Ohio.
Wait, go back to Ed Kemper real quick.
Yes.
So I read this one part about the night that he killed his mom. He went to go talk to her about something and she like put her book down and was like, oh great, now we're going to talk about your feelings, huh?
Yeah.
And then that was the night when he decided, well, I'm going to kill her.
Yeah.
Ugh. Okay.
I come back to that kind of a little bit.
Oh.
Not like that night, but stuff with like his mom.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, we got a whole other bad guy to get through first.
Yep.
So Castro was a man who lived what seemed like an ordinary life on the surface, but behind closed doors, his house on Seymour Avenue was the site of unimaginable horrors.
Mm-hmm.
For nearly a decade, 3 women, Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus, were held captive by Castro in the heart of a quiet neighborhood.
Oh, God.
Ariel Castro was born on July 10, 1960, in Puerto Rico. His parents separated when he was young, and like many children in broken homes, his childhood was marked by instability. Eventually, he moved to the mainland USA. Not the mainland USA. That sounds weird. Eventually, he moved to the mainland U.S., settling in Cleveland, Ohio. Castro,
like, why?
I don't know. Castro worked as a school bus driver, but after incidents of reckless behavior, such as leaving a child on a bus, he was fired in 2012. It's crazy how fucking recent this shit was.
I know.
While on the surface, Castro lived an unremarkable life. His relationships revealed early signs of the darkness he carried. He was violent and controlling, particularly towards his former partner, Grimilda Figueroa. I know that I totally made that sound so white, and I'm so sorry. Figueroa. She accused him of domestic violence throughout the relationship, claiming he broke her nose, ribs, and arms. Though they had children together, Castro's abusive behavior drove her away. Castro's violence didn't stop there, but what no one would have imagined was the extent of the horrors he would soon inflict on others. Between 2002 and 2004, Ariel Castro abducted 3 women from the streets of Cleveland. Each woman was lured into his home with false promises, only to be imprisoned. Michelle Knight was Castro's first victim. She was 21 years old when she was abducted in August 2002. Michelle had already lived a difficult life, having recently lost custody of her son and was heading to a social services appointment when she vanished.
Oh, it's so heartbreaking.
Right. Castro promised her a ride and once inside his home, chained her in the basement. Amanda Berry was next. On April 21st, 2003, the day before her 17th birthday, she accepted a ride from Castro, a man she recognized as the father of a friend. Like Michelle, Amanda was also imprisoned inside the house. Gina De Jesus was only 14 when she disappeared on April 2nd, 2004. She, too, had been a friend of Castro's daughter and was lured in with the promise of a ride home. What followed for these women was nearly a decade of unimaginable abuse, physical, sexual, and psychological.
Because what's so scary is like you wouldn't think twice about your friend's dad being like,
correct,
hey, do you need a ride home? Like, oh my God, thank you so much.
That's why they always say that the perpetrator, like with almost any crime, is typically someone they know.
Right. Because I would never question if one of my friend's dads are like, hey, do you need a ride home?
Your guard is down.
You what?
Your guard is down.
Yeah. I'd be like, oh, thanks so much.
Yep,
and then I'd be
absolutely.
like, how's so-and-so? How's this?
Yeah.
Like, not a care in the world. Oh, can I stop by the house real quick? Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't even think anything of it.
Correct. Castro chained them in the basement, starved them, and subjected them to regular beatings. So we're going to kind of go through their horrors.
Oh, my God.
Which is...
They're so bad.
It's so bad. Not that the other stuff we've been talking about is exactly light.
Right. But it's a
little bit more glossed over, like those details versus this, I feel like probably is also typically glossed over.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to know, if we're going to talk about these crimes, it's important to know what these people went through.
Oh my God, I know.
You know? And while, I'm never going to be that hypocrite that was like, don't glorify, because I watch TV shows all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I know we try very hard to be respectful that these are real people's lives.
Right. Yeah.
And so I also kind of figured like no one's really going to go look that up.
Right.
And so if there was going to be things you may not know much about this case, I figured that'd be it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also why we're here.
Yeah.
When Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus were kidnapped by Ariel Castro, they were subjected to years of unimaginable suffering, both physically and emotionally. Held inside Castro's home at 2207 Seymour Avenue, they lived a nightmare that only came to an end after nearly a decade in captivity. So let's talk about some of the conditions that they were forced to endure. So their physical conditions and their restraints. From the moment each woman was brought into Castro's home, they were immediately restrained. Castro used chains and ropes to bind his victims, often leaving them locked in dark, windowless rooms or confined to the basement. For long periods of time, the women were chained to radiators or kept in positions that made even basic movements impossible. Castro controlled every aspect of their lives, from when they ate to when they were allowed to use the bathroom, and he would regularly deprive them of food and water, leaving them to starve for days at a time. The basement of the house was a particular site of horror. The women were initially held there, chained to poles or walls in filthy, cold, and damp conditions. Castro deliberately soundproofed parts of his house to prevent their screams from being heard, and rigged alarms and locks throughout the house to ensure that they could not escape. So some of the sexual violence and psychological manipulation, skip ahead if this is, viewer discretion may advise. Castro repeatedly raped all 3 women, subjecting them to unthinkable acts of sexual violence on a regular basis. Over the course of their captivity, they were beaten and tortured whenever Castro wanted to assert his control. In Michelle Knight's case, she became pregnant multiple times, but Castro forced her to miscarry by starving her and physically assaulting her, once by punching her in the stomach and striking her with a barbell. Amanda Berry also became pregnant but was allowed to carry the child to term. She gave birth to a daughter, Jocelyn, inside the house in December 2006. The conditions of her birth were harrowing. Michelle Knight, having had some medical training, was forced to assist in the delivery using improvised tools. Castro threatened to kill her if anything went wrong during the birth.
Oh my God. That pressure.
Right. Remarkably, the child was born healthy despite the dire circumstances. This child became a strange source of normalcy in the house. Castro would dote on his daughter, taking her out in public while the woman remained trapped inside.
God.
Yeah. Psychological abuse was another tool in Castro's arsenal of control. He manipulated his victims with mind games, creating an environment of constant fear and uncertainty. At times, he would pretend to be a kind captor, giving small gifts or allowing them to watch television. They share this story about how on Thursdays when he was out, they would always watch Vampire Diaries.
Aww.
And that's what they would talk about and keep them sane before he got home and hell broke loose.
Right.
But these brief moments of relief were followed by horrific punishments, creating a psychological roller coaster that made the women feel like they had no hope of escaping. Castro used every tactic possible to break their spirits, convincing them that no one was looking for them and that they would die in captivity. Daily life. Despite the horrific abuse, Castro forced the women into a strange routine that mimicked aspects of normal life. He would take Jocelyn to the park, celebrate holidays, and even occasionally allow the women to eat meals together and watch television. However, these moments of normalcy were part of his control tactics, an illusion of freedom that masked the grim reality of their situation. The women were isolated from each other for long periods of time, often confined to separate rooms, and can only communicate sporadically. However, they developed a silent solidarity, understanding each other's pain without words.
Right.
Their bond became a source of strength during the long years of captivity.
I mean, you'd need that.
Oh, for sure. After nearly a decade of enduring Castro's abuse, the women's ordeal came to an end on May 6, 2013, but not without an extraordinary act of bravery. Amanda Berry, who had been held captive for over 10 years, saw an opportunity when Castro left the house one day. Castro often took his daughter, Jocelyn, out with him, leaving the women alone but still locked inside. On this particular day, Amanda realized that one of the doors had been left unlocked, although it was still barricaded. She had a brief moment of hesitation, but knowing she could be their only chance at freedom, Amanda made a life-changing decision. She managed to push through the door and scream for help. Her cries caught the attention of Charles Ramsey, a neighbor who was outside at the time.
God.
He, along with another man, came to her aid. Initially, they wouldn't believe what they were witnessing. Amanda told them who she was. Quote, "I'm Amanda Berry. I've been missing for 10 years. Ramsey quickly called 911 and police arrived at the scene. Inside the house, Michelle Knight and Dina DeJesus were still in captivity. When police entered the home, they found both women in separate rooms. The officers were shocked by the conditions inside, filthy, cramped, and littered with chains, evidence of the years of torment the women had endured. In just a matter of hours, the years of darkness were over. Michelle, Amanda, and Gina, and Jocelyn were finally free.
I cannot even imagine.
Their rescue marked the beginning of a long road to recovery, but the immediate horror had finally come to an end. In the days following their escape, the world watched in shock and disbelief as details of the women's captivity came to light. I kind of vaguely remember.
I remember
hearing about her, or maybe it was someone else who had gone to the police or something like that. And I was like, that's such a strange thing to, just walk in and say. And then it came out later, all these things happened. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
But other than that, I
vaguely.
That's the only, it's only the very beginning part of it when it first came to light that I remember. And then everything else after that, I didn't follow.
Yeah.
Ariel Castro was quickly arrested and taken into custody. In July 2013, he pled guilty to more than 900 criminal charges, including kidnapping, rape, and aggravated murder for forcing Michelle Knight to miscarry.
Jeez.
During his trial, Castro showed no real remorse for his actions. He even attempted to justify his crimes, claiming he wasn't a monster and that the women were happy with him at times.
At times.
An appalling attempt to minimize the torture he inflicted on them. Castro was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 1,000 years. I will say, I don't know who's in charge or what runs this universe, but I really fucking hope that no matter who it is, follows through with that. So like the people that have like life in prison plus whatever, that like when you die,
you still get those 1,000.
Correct.
Yeah. That's why they say like they'll make like a life sentence. I think it's like 200 something years. So if you're serving a life sentence, it's 200 something years.
Yeah. And like in wherever we go after death,
I hope so.
Upholds that. No matter if any of us are right or wrong, like whatever the system is, I really hope that like,
I do too.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because a month into his sentence, Ariel Castro, the baby back bitch he is, took his own life, hanging himself in his prison cell. While his death marked the end of his chapter of evil for his victims, the journey of healing was only beginning. And the years since their escape, Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus have shown incredible resilience and strength. Each of them has worked to rebuild their lives and reclaim their narratives. They've shared their stories in books, interviews, and public appearances to raise awareness of the dangers of kidnapping and to inspire other survivors of trauma. Gina, along with her cousin Sylvia Colin, co-founded the Center for Missing, Abducted, Exploited Children and Adults, also called the Center.
Good.
An organization dedicated to providing resources and support for individuals and families affected by abduction and exploitation. Amanda Berry and De Jesus later co-authored a memoir titled Hope, a memoir of survival in Cleveland. Berry also works to help other families of kidnapping victims by hosting a missing person segment on the local news station. She's devoted to raising her daughter Jocelyn and has sought to help other families of kidnapping victims.
Which is the one who was going to the Suns thing?
Michelle.
Did she ever? Yeah.
Yeah. No, she's still, as recently as March 2023, has not had contact.
Because wasn't it something where like the son did get put into foster care and she didn't want to kind of uproot his life?
I think something like that.
Oh, that is just heartbreaking.
Yeah. After her release, Michelle Knight wrote her first book titled Finding Me, detailing her horrifying ordeal, and a second book, like Life After Darkness, My Journey to Happiness, in 2014 and 2018, respectively. Knight told People in March 2023 that she planned on hosting Tragedy to Triumph, an evening with Michelle Knight, a dinner and raffle to raise money for her nonprofit group, Unleashed Animal Rescue, on May 6, 2023. So hopefully that happened.
Yeah.
Which is also the 10th anniversary of her rescue.
Oh my gosh.
Knight exclusively told People, quote, ever since I was a little girl, I always wanted to take care of animals, especially with my traumatic past, with my childhood and what I went through in the House of Horrors. I endured watching countless sweet, precious animals being abused by Ariel Castro. They were starved, beaten, and left for dead. She continued, quote, so I'm standing up and being a voice for these precious animals. I found that when I was helping animals, in return, the animals were helping me.
Because I think one of the things he did, too, is he would give them pets.
And then kill them. Yep. Ariel Castro's House of Horrors is no longer standing. The house at 2207 Seymour Avenue was demolished in August 2013. The case of Ariel Castro and the decade-long captivity of Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus had a profound impact on many levels, both positive and negative. So some of the positive: an increase in public awareness of kidnapping and abuse. One of the most significant positive outcomes of the Ariel Castro case was the increased public awareness of kidnapping, human trafficking, and domestic abuse.
Dang.
The sheer length of time these women were held in captivity in the middle of a residential neighborhood shocks people worldwide.
That's what, and I hate to think this, but I do wonder, like, around neighborhoods, are there people, like, being held captive in houses?
Right. I mean, one of the things that I was going to do before it was like, okay, this is already a lot, was like, this is not the first time that people have
it's not
been returned, escaped, whatever.
Ugh.
Yeah. It reminded society that abductions can happen to anyone, anywhere, and may be hidden in plain sight. People became more vigilant in their communities, looking out for suspicious activity and becoming more aware of their surroundings. Neighbors are now more likely to take note of warning signs such as unusual behaviors or changes in daily patterns. This case underscored the importance of community vigilance and the involvement in the safety of one another. Another positive is reforms in law enforcement and missing person protocols. After the case became public, law enforcement agencies across the U.S. reevaluated their approach to missing persons investigations, particularly for cases involving young women, minorities, and individuals with troubled backgrounds. In particular, Michelle Knight's disappearance had been largely overlooked because of her personal struggles, like losing custody of her son.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that her case was not given the same priority as the others highlighted the systematic issues within the criminal justice system.
Was she a minority?
I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
but she was taking off the missing persons list after like 15 months.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so she wasn't even on the considered a missing person when she was found.
Jeez.
Prompting calls for changes in how missing persons cases, especially those involving marginalized individuals, are handled.
Mm-hmm.
So she might not have been a minority, but she might be in some other marginalized
group.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like socioeconomic or things along those lines. Police departments now have stricter protocols and better interagency cooperation when investigating missing person reports. This includes keeping cases open longer, ensuring the leads are thoroughly followed, and paying more attention to the possibility that missing persons may still be alive even after years.
Good.
Resources for victims of abuse and kidnapping.
Mm-hmm.
The high-profile nature of the case led to the establishment of additional resources and organizations dedicated to helping victims of abuse, kidnapping, and sexual violence, which we will have those numbers in our show notes.
Mm-hmm.
For example, Amanda Berry and Gina De Jesus became involved in outreach efforts and helped launch organizations focused on missing persons and human trafficking prevention. The case also led to the development of support networks for survivors of prolonged trauma and captivity, providing them with mental health services, rehabilitation programs, and community support.
Like, I hate that they had to be the ones to kind of start some of these things.
Right.
Like, that they weren't already there.
Right.
And also that it fell on them to have to do it.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, I'm happy that they were able to come up with these things.
Yeah. It was a little scary when Dad and I stopped at a rest stop on the way back. He stopped every place we stopped at. I was like, "You're such a man." Like every freaking place we stopped at, I was like, I would never. I would never.
Yeah.
And we stopped at just like a quick rest stop because I really had to go to the bathroom. And again, I was like, I would never have stopped here. And it was daytime.
Yes.
And I go into the bathroom, and when I go to wash my hands, there's like a whole sign of like who to call if, you think you're being human trafficked or suspect someone is. And I'm like, yeah, because if it's going to happen anywhere, it's going to happen at a random rest stop
Uh-huh. Oh,
off
absolutely.
the road of 95.
Yep.
So
Ugh.
another positive impact, survivor advocacy and empowerment. The three women, Michelle, Amanda, and Gina, became powerful advocates for survivors of kidnapping, abuse, and trauma. By sharing their stories publicly, they inspired other victims of violence to come forward, seek help, and find hope. For example, like all the people coming forward in the Diddy case.
Mm-hmm.
It took one person coming forward,
Right.
and then everyone else was like, okay, if they can do it, I can do it.
Yep.
And sometimes you need that.
No, yeah, absolutely.
Strength in numbers.
Especially in this time and age. You need
Absolutely.
the multiple people for someone to, as bad as it is, for people to
Correct.
believe you.
Yeah. Their courage in reclaiming their lives after years of torture is a testament to human resilience. Books like Michelle Knight's Finding Me and Amanda Berry's co-authored memoir Hope allowed the women to control their narratives, helping them heal and raising awareness about their experiences. These stories empowered countless others in similar situations to seek freedom and healing. But with everything that could be positive, there's also negative sides.
Of course.
So one of them is lasting psychological trauma for the victims.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, as much as I watch these shows, they usually end it when the case is solved.
Mm-hmm.
Every single time, I'm like, especially if someone has survived,
Mm-hmm.
I'm always thinking to myself, what are they thinking? What are they feeling?
Right.
Yes, it's solved. Cool. But
all the impacts are will never go away.
Correct. While the escape of the three women brought them physical freedom, the psychological scars of their captivity are deep and lasting. Michelle Knight, in particular, faced incredible challenges in reclaiming her life. She had been tortured the longest and suffered forced miscarriages during her time in captivity. Even after their escape, the women dealt with severe post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, and the difficulties of reintegrating into society. Knight has spoken publicly about her ongoing struggles with memory loss, nightmares, and difficulties trusting people. Although their strength is remarkable, the trauma they experience will likely affect them for the rest of their lives.
Oh, yeah.
The strain on law enforcement reputation.
Mm.
The case revealed gaps in the investigation process, leading to the criticism of law enforcement. Amanda Berry's mother had died believing her daughter was gone forever.
Ugh, that's just heartbreaking.
Largely because investigators had failed to keep the hope alive or explore leads more thoroughly. Even more troubling, Michelle's Knight case was initially disregarded. Her disappearance wasn't even listed as a missing persons case for years. Law enforcement agencies faced significant scrutiny for the way that they handled the women's disappearances. In hindsight, it became clear that miscommunication, bias, and lack of follow-up had contributed to these women remaining hidden for so long. This case forced police departments to address their shortcomings and rework investigation procedures for missing person cases. Fear and distrust in communities. So while they become more vigilant, too much vigilance, the fact that Ariel Castro was able to carry out such atrocities in a residential neighborhood for over a decade without being discovered instilled a sense of fear and distrust in many communities. People began questioning how well they really knew their neighbors and whether someone could be harboring dark secrets behind closed doors. This case also raised concern about how effectively we monitor signs of domestic abuse, kidnapping, and other criminal activities. Castro lived in a busy neighborhood, and while some neighbors reported strange things, such as seeing a naked woman crawling in his backyard, these reports were never followed up on, creating a lingering distrust in local authorities. Impact on victims' families. The families of Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus were left with emotional and psychological scars themselves. For years, these families searched for their loved ones, unsure whether they were dead or alive. Amanda Berry's mother, LaWanna Miller, died of heart failure in 2006, just 3 years after her daughter's abduction. She had been devastated by the disappearance and sadly passed away believing Amanda would never return. While the families were overjoyed at the women's eventual rescue, the years of uncertainty and pain they experienced left permanent emotional damage. And also the negative impact of Ariel Castro's death. Some saw Ariel Castro's suicide as a form of escaping justice. While Castro was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, he hanged himself just a month into his sentence. His death denied the victims the chance to fully confront their abuser in a long-term legal context, and for some, it was a missed opportunity for justice to be fully served. The fact that Castro took his own life quickly after being sentenced left many feeling that he evaded the full punishment and accountability for his actions.
But it also makes you wonder, too, like, would they have wanted to encounter him and talk to him in court? You know what I mean?
I think they did get a chance to do a victim's impact statement.
Okay. Like, to him?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay.
I think it's more of just facing it in this sense, more maybe like metaphorically facing it. Like he is now behind bars. And maybe for them, him being dead is more of a relief.
Right, yeah.
Knowing that no matter what, he can't hurt you again.
Right.
I think for the greater community, they now want to see this terrible person suffer.
Right.
And by killing himself, they feel like he's not going to suffer the way that he deserves to suffer.
He got out of it easy.
Yeah. The Ariel Castro case is a haunting reminder of the evil that can hide behind closed doors. But out of the darkness come stories of hope, survival, and reform. While the negative impacts of this case were profound and long-lasting, the courage of the survivors and the changes it inspired, both in terms of awareness and systematic reform, have left a lasting remark on society. Ultimately, this case has taught us to never lose hope and always remember that even in the darkest of situations, there's a chance for survival and renewal. I still have a smidge left because, as I was doing these, I couldn't help but think, this reminds me of a Criminal Mind episode.
Oh my God.
So I have a few connections. So with Mullen and Kemper.
Okay.
So especially like with Mullen being kind of more religious fanatic, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There is in one of the first seasons, I want to even say like the first season, there is a killer who is put away when he's young. And they're like, no, he shouldn't be free. He's scary.
Yeah.
He's freed. He does all the things that people said he was going to do. But he also eats people.
Oh.
So.
Slightly different.
The absolute crazy thing that happens in that episode is that he is part of the search party.
Oh, yeah. That's a common thing.
And they don't realize it at first. And when they're interviewing him later and they're trying to figure out, like, I think they're trying to find like one of his last victims and they can't find her anywhere. And like the way he says something, then they all recall that he was the one who provided the food. And so it's never fully
said
or acknowledged.
But implied.
But it's implied that these people ate.
Yep.
Yeah. He also comes back in season 10. So like I said, like Kemper, he was released from a psychiatric hospital after being advised against it. Many of Kemper's doctors said that he shouldn't be released back to his mother, given his deep hatred for her in an early age.
Yeah.
Douglas and Ressler are definitely David Rossi and Jason Gideon because they are regarded as the founders of the BAU, and they have all these flashbacks of them traveling around and studying serial killers to create profiles and to catch the offenders. So they're them.
Right. Yeah.
And in episode 4, or not episode 4, I'm sorry, an episode around the beginning of season 4, I think, Reed and Hodgner were traveling to a prison to interview a notorious killer who was about to be put to death and wanted to finally talk about his crimes. The guy looks a lot like Kemper. He's this big, tall dude. He's got those square-ass glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And the show uses an incident that actually occurred with Ressler and Kemper that happened during one of his interviews. So in the 2 previous visits, Ressler said that he was accompanied by someone else, but one time he thought that he had achieved a rapport with Kemper, so he ventured in alone.
Oh, God.
They ended up in a small, locked cell near death row for hours. Ressler finally used a button to summon a guard, but no one came. He continued to talk and press the button, and still, no one came. He says that Kemper was sensitive to his psyche and believed he must have appeared apprehensive. Ressler claimed that Kemper told him to relax and then said, quote, "If I went apeshit in here, you'd be in a lot of trouble, wouldn't you?
Oh
I could screw your head off and place it on the table to greet the guard."
Oh my God.
Ressler mentally sparred with him, trying to buy time and hoping to give the impression that he had a way to defend himself. Eventually, the guard came, and Kemper said that he'd been merely kidding, but Ressler never went into an interview alone again. And that's literally exactly what happened with Reed and Hodgner. It was like a guard change. And he was like, something about guards changing. And Hodgner was already going through his divorce, so he was like, I'll fight anybody. And Reed being Reed, goes into this whole like, blah, 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 I know why you did what you did. And he starts into this whole psychological reason for why he did all these things to basically kill time until someone can come get them.
Right.
It works. The guy was like, is that all true? And he's like, I have no idea. And then walks out. He's like, yes, mic drop. Love Reed. He's the love of my life. Also, so for the relation to Castro's story, in season 8, a girl escapes after being held captive for like 10 years. And got help and told police that there were 2 other girls being held captive with her. And the girl who escaped also had children with her captor.
Oh.
Yeah.
There's also an SVU episode like that.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So my final thing is...
Is this your end conclusion?
No.
Oh.
It's just one more little tidbit I added today.
Okay. Because I was going to say, that's not the normal way you do this, Kenzie.
So I thought it'd be interesting to ask ChatGPT.
Oh my God.
If Ed Kemper committed his crimes today, would he have gotten caught much sooner?
Oh, interesting.
Here's what it said.
Okay.
If Ed Kemper committed his crimes today, it is very likely he would have been caught much sooner due to advancements in technology, changes in law enforcement methods, and increased public awareness around serial crimes. Here are a few reasons why. 1. DNA and forensic evidence. While DNA was not commonly used in the 1970s, today even trace amounts of biological matter left at a crime scene can provide significant leads. Number 2, surveillance technology. Today, surveillance cameras are ubiquitous, especially in public spaces, on roads, and even in many private homes. Kemper's frequent interactions with young hitchhikers or visits to police officers may have been caught on camera, providing early evidence of his movements and associations. Digital footprints. Cell phone tracking, internet activity, and social media usage could have been monitored if Kemper had used any of these technologies. He would have left a trail of his movements or potentially incriminating communications online.
Yeah.
Number 4, improved law enforcement coordination. In the 1970s, police departments often did not share information as efficiently across jurisdictions.
Which is just so wild.
Right. Today, law enforcement agencies have more integrated databases like CODIS for DNA and VICAP for violent crime patterns, which help track and analyze serial offenders. Kemper's violent patterns might have been detected sooner in the system. Psychological profiling, behavioral science, although it's kind of, he's part of the reason we have that.
Right.
So it's like, had it happened now, would we have that?
Probably, though.
Yeah. Modern psychological profiling and the work of behavioral analysis units, like the FBI's BAU, have evolved significantly. While profiling was in its infancy during Kemper's time, today's techniques might have helped law enforcement understand his patterns and mindset more quickly, focusing the investigation. and also public awareness. With more awareness of the dangers of hitchhiking, the prevalence of the true crime media, and the internet's role in spreading information, people today might have been quicker to recognize suspicious behavior or report interactions with someone like Kemper.
Yeah.
Kemper's intelligence and ability to charm people, including law enforcement, may still have helped him evade capture for some time, but with the modern tools available, would likely have drastically reduced the duration of his killing spree.
Wow. I believe it. Yeah. I mean, sounds right on point.
Right. In conclusion, did you learn something new?
A little bit.
Okay.
A little bit.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's all that matters.
That was good.
That was, yeah.
So creepy.
Terrifying.
They're just scary dudes.
Yeah. And
Kemper, in my opinion, is so scary because he's so smart.
Oh, for sure.
And then Ariel Castro is so scary because of what he did just under everyone's noses. And like how awful he was.
When you think about people who are in positions of power and how long they get away with those things.
Yeah.
It's not because they're morons.
Right.
The only reason why this moron is still in power is because he has smart people around him telling him what to do. Because he's too stupid. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean.
I heard someone say like the IYKYK as ikyik.
Yeah.
So they'll say
ikyik.
Ikyik.
But yeah, so if you haven't heard of those people before, cool. You definitely learned something new.
Oh, yeah.
So I thought it was interesting lining up the timelines of when Kemper.
Yes. That's something I didn't know, is that there were so many, well, like 2 other huge ones going on at the same time.
Yeah, literally.
Right.
Crazy. So.
Well, as always, nicely done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This was hard. This one was a challenge.
Well, you did a great job.
Thank you.
And it was a perfect way to wrap up spooky season.
Yeah, because it was the spookiest of spooky.
Because now people will go out trick-or-treating at night by themselves, going to random people's houses and such.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Buddy system.
Buddy system.
Also, don't be weird and act like people are going to put drugs into your child's candy because drugs are expensive and not worth giving to a child.
In this economy? Candy's already expensive enough right now as it is.
Yeah. Let your kids eat some candy.
Oh, yeah.
Well, if you are going to do that mean trick where you say all their candy's gone, make sure you film it.
Oh, I know. Some of the kids are just a heart of gold.
Make sure that your costume is not cultural appropriation.
Send us your costumes too, though.
Oh, yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
We'd love to see costumes, what creativity you guys come up with.
Oh,
I feel like
love
the more years that pass, especially because it's like, okay, we can't do that costume anymore because that's not appropriate. People have to be more creative.
Yeah.
And some people can come up with some of the funniest shit.
Yeah.
I just saw one on, I think it was on TikTok, where they were a cigarette box. And when something like a lever was pulled, a cigarette would pop out as if it was like a penis.
Oh, that's funny.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot more that are inappropriate, but
those are funny.
But those are funny.
Those are funny.
Those are very funny. And above all else, have a very safe and spooky Halloween.
So as always, stay safe. Or no.
Stay scary.
And stay safe.